African rhythms, passed down to us through ancient spirits. Feel the spirit, a unifying force. Come on, move with the spirit. Stand up, clap your hands. Groove with the rhythms, get down, get off.
Welcome to Africa World Now Project. I'm your host and producer, James Pope. Today, part 2 of our 3-part series where we focus on Patrice Lumumba's Pan-Africanism with the Kenyan Organic Intellectuals Network. Africa World Now Project is next. At the opening of the All-African Conference in Leopoldville, August 25th, 1960, Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba provides these prescient framing thoughts for that gathering. I present this speech in part here. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear comrades, the fighting Congolese people are proud and happy to receive their brothers in arms in their country today. For my government, for us Congolese, your presence here at such a moment is the most striking proof of the African reality whose existence our enemies have always denied and are still attempting to deny. But you, of course, know that the reality is even more stubborn than they, and Africa lives on and fights. She refuses to die to justify the arguments about the backwardness of our history, a history we have made with our own hands, our skins, our blood. It is at conferences such as this that we first become conscious of our personality, of our growing solidarity. When at our first conferences, which were held in various cities in Africa, we brought up the problem of decolonization. The imperialists never expected we would be successful. However, since the first Congress of the Peoples of Africa in Accra in December 1958, we have traversed the entire road of liberation of our continent together. You will recall the upsurge of the liberation struggle of the peoples of Angola, Algeria, the Congo, Kenya, Mozambique, Nyasaland, now known as Malawi, and Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe, after the conference in Accra. You will remember a decisive step forward was taken after that historic conference. Nothing, neither bullets nor repressions, could stop this popular movement. The work of this conference is aimed at accelerating the movement for the independence of the African continent. Ministers, dear fighters for the freedom of Africa, it is your duty to show the world and those who sneer at us that nothing can deter us from liberating Africa, which is our common aim. We can achieve this aim only in solidarity and unity. Our solidarity will have meaning only when it is boundless and when we are convinced that Africa's destiny is indivisible. Such are the deep-going principles of the work you will have to do. This meeting will prepare the ground at which our countries will have to speak on. 1. The unqualified support of all African states in the general struggle for a Pan-African bloc. 2. A policy of neutralism with the purpose of achieving genuine independence. 3. The breaking down of colonial barriers through cultural exchanges. 4. Trade agreements between African states. 5. Africans' position with regard to the European Common Market. 6. Military cooperation. 7. The building in Leopoldville of a powerful radio station with the aid of all African states. And 8. The creation of a research center. Ministers, you have come into contact with the reality of the Congo here, in the very heart of the crisis that we shall have to resolve. Those African leaders who are fighting for African unity have said no to the strangulation of Africa. All of them immediately realized that the attempts of the imperialists to restore their rule threaten not only the independence of the Congo, but also the existence of all the independent states of Africa. They all realized that if the Congo perishes, the whole of Africa will be plunged into the gloom of defeat and bondage. That is further striking proof of African unity. It is concrete testimony of the unity that we need in the face of imperialism's monstrous appetite. All statesmen are agreed that this reality is not debated, but fought for, so that it may be defended. We have gathered here in order that together we may defend Africa. In reply to the actions of the imperialist states, for whom Belgium is only an instrument, we must unite the resistance front of the free and fighting nations of Africa. We must oppose the enemies of freedom with a coalition of free men. Our common destiny is now being decided here in the Congo. It is, in effect, here that the last act of Africa's emancipation and rehabilitation is being played. In extending the struggle, whose primary objective was to save the dignity of the African, the Congolese people have chosen independence. In doing so, they were aware that a single blow would not free them from colonial feathers. That judicial independence was only the first step, that a further long and trying effort would be required. The road we have chosen is not an easy one, but it is the road of pride and freedom. We were aware that as long as the country was dependent, as long as she did not take her destiny into her own hands, the main thing would be lacking. This concerns the other colonies, no matter what their standard of life is or what positive aspects of the colonial system they have. We have declared our destiny for a speedy independence, without a transition period, and without compromises, with such emphases because we have suffered more mockery, insults, and humiliation than anybody else. What purpose could delays serve when we already knew that sooner or later we would have to revise and re-examine everything? We had to create a new system adapted to the requirements of purely African evolution, change the methods forced on us, and in particular, find ourselves and free ourselves from the mental attitudes and various complexes in which colonization kept us for centuries. We were offered a choice between liberation and the continuation of bondage. There can be no compromise between freedom and slavery. We choose to pay the price of freedom. The classical methods of the colonialists, which we all knew or partially still know, are particularly vital here. Survivals of military occupation, tribal disunity, sustained and encouraged over a long period, and destructive political opposition planned, directed, and paid. You know how difficult it has been for a newly independent state to get rid of the military bases installed by the former occupying powers. We must declare here and now that henceforth Africa refuses to maintain the armed forces of the imperialists in its territories. Our internal difficulties, tribal war, and the nuclei of political opposition seem to have been accidentally concentrated in the regions with our richest mineral and power resources. We know how all this was organized, and in particular who supports it today in our house. Our Katanga because of its uranium, copper, and gold. Our Bakwanga and Kasi because of its diamonds have become hotbeds of imperialist intrigues. The object of these intrigues is to recapture economic control of our country. The resonance that has now been caused by the Congolese problem shows the weight that Africa has in the world today. Our countries, which only yesterday they wanted to ignore as colonial countries, are today causing an old world concern here in Africa. Let them worry about what belongs to them. That is not our affair. Our future, our destiny, a free Africa is our affair. This is our year which you have witnessed and shared in. It is the year of our undisputed victory. We all know, and the world knows it, that Algeria is not French, that Angola is not Portuguese, that Kenya is not English. We know that Africa is neither French, nor British, nor American, nor Russian, that it is African. We know the objects of the West. Yesterday, they divided us on the level of a tribe, clan, and village. Today, with Africa liberating herself, they seek to divide us on the level of states. They want to create antagonistic blocs, satellites, and having begun from that stage of the Cold War, deepen the division in order to perpetuate their rule. I think I shall not be making a mistake if I say that a united Africa of today rejects these intrigues. That is why we have chosen the policy of positive neutralism, which is the only acceptable policy allowing us to preserve our dignity. For us, there is neither a Western nor a communist bloc, but separate countries whose attitude towards Africa dictates our policy towards them. Let each country declare its position and act unequivocally with regard to Africa. We refuse to be an area of international intrigues, a hotbed and stake in the Cold War. We affirm our human dignity of freed men who are steadily taking the destiny of their nations and their continent in their own hands. We are acutely in need of peace and concord, and our foreign policy is directed towards cooperation, loyalty, and friendship among nations. We want to be a force of peaceful progress, a force of conciliation. An independent and united Africa will make a large and positive contribution to world peace. But torn into zones of hostile influence, she will only intensify world antagonism and increase tension. These are the selected words presented by Patrice Lumumba from the All-African Conference held in Leopoldville on August 25, 1960. These words carry ideas which are intended to provide a guide of action for those then and a platform for assessment, analysis, and identifying points of extension today. This year represents an important historical conjuncture that has implications for our contemporary moment of crises, yet extremely instructive in how we can move toward a different future. It is the 100th year recognition of the birth of Malik El Shabazz, aka Malcolm X, as well as Frantz Fanon, Patrice Lumumba, Medgar Evers, Robert F. Williams. There are, have been, and will be an assortment of panels, programs, conferences, talks, and colloquium that explore and contextualize them, individually and together. What we intend to offer is an identification of the continuities and discontinuities with the conditions and structures that produced thought and practice of this group, not intended to isolate them from many others, but to provide a lens to telescope up, down, above, and under the temporality of human geography, paying acute attention to how people resist in the face of oppressive forces. Simply stated, we intend to connect the dots across time and space, attempting to read deeply the instructive details of how to construct a new society, a global society that undergirds these and other people's thought and practice who resist the backwardness of capital, no matter the cost. With this, today, in this part 2 of our collaboration with the Kenyan Organic Intellectual Network, we explore Patrice Lumumba's Pan-Africanism. In this session, we intentionally examine the Pan-Africanism of Patrice Lumumba, paying attention to the role and importance of the Congo in African liberation struggles by asking, what strands of Lumumba's thought are important to the current struggles globally? Why is the Congo region important in Africana liberation struggles? What is the connection between ecological struggles and the Congo? We are ultimately, for this entire series in general, this session in particular, interested in thinking collectively about what are some of the ideas that each of these figures offer for expanding and informing our practice today. And most importantly, how do we understand these figures in the long struggle for liberation of the Africana world? Joining us for this conversation are Gatinga Ndungu, who is a community organizer with the Mathare Social Justice Center, which is under the Social Justice Center's working group. He is a part of the Revolutionary Socialist League Brigade that organizes political education in different political cells in the respective centers in Nairobi. He is also a member of the Kenyan Organic Intellectuals Network. Okaka Onyango, who is a member of the Revolutionary Socialist League, Organic Intellectuals Network, and Social Justice Movement. He is a dedicated, tech-driven community organizer, blending roles of revolutionary intellectualism and communications strategist. Gerald Kamau is an ecological justice activist based in Kayole Community Justice Center, as well as the Kenyan Organic Intellectuals Network. Our show is produced today in solidarity with the Native, Indigenous, African, and Afro-descendant communities at Standing Rock, Venezuela, Corporation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi, Brazil, the Avalon Village in Detroit, Colombia, Kenya, Palestine, South Africa, Ghana, Haiti, and other places who are fighting for the protection of our land for the benefit of all peoples. Listen intently, think critically, act accordingly. I'd like to take the time to welcome you all for this important, robust conversation that is part of a series and a collaboration between Kenyan Organic Intellectual Network and the other formations and institutions and organizations that you're engaged with to talk about Patrice Lumumba's Pan-Africanism. And this is part of a series that we're looking at Haj Malik El Shabazz, Frantz Fanon, and Lumumba as being exemplars of revolutionary radical practice in the African world towards African liberation. So with that being said, I would like to just welcome you all. We'll start with, you introducing yourself and any formation and organizational expressions or anything that you're engaged with. We'll start with Katinga.
Thank you so much, comrade, and thank you for having me here this evening. Gatanga Ndongo. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm with two organizations one called Madare Social Justice Center, which is based in Nairobi, Madare Eastlands. The other one is Revolutionary Socialist League, and I'm also part of Organic Intellectual Network. So I locate my struggles in Madare, Nairobi, where, I was, this is where I grew up from a young age. And when I became politicized, that is back, I guess in 2019. But then my build-up started much earlier from 2019. And, living in this very unequal society. And, Kenya is one of the countries that, embodies what neoliberalism is, the kind of inequality that you see also in the world country and especially in Nairobi. Nairobi, is more of a colonial project, and spatially, the way it has been spatially constructed, it speaks about these kind of, inequalities, and which were constructed during the colonial times and which have continued to be perpetuated to this time. And, me finishing my undergraduate back in 2019 and coming back to Madare where I grew up, that's when I started looking at things from a different angle. I had this anger in me. I had this, kind of, time that needs to be solved. But I had never met a place where I could channel my anger well. So me coming back in my community back in 2019, I had this somehow disconnected from Madare where I was born for about 8 years, 4 in high school and 4 during my graduate studies. So me coming back and trying to reconnect with my friends from primary school, that's when I realized that the system is messed up. Because what I used to be told that, okay, when I ask for a certain friend, where is this friend and this friend? This friend is incarcerated in Nairobi industrial area. What about the other one? He was killed, extrajudicially by the police. What about the other one? He was killed by he was killed by a mob. The other one killed by the police. These kind of stories never ended. And the few who are not killed by the police or who are not in prison and who are out, they were either, drug addicts, struggling with a lot of drugs that are there in Madare. And you find that, that is the kind of situation you find if people find themselves in Madare. This kind of very systemic kind of poverty that is there, and which I consider it as, as some kind of a poverty that has been somehow very systemic in a way organized in a design to continue oppressing us. And, this is when I started questioning a lot of things. Why do we find that a lot of youths have to die in Madare? Why do we find that, many youth do not even get past 25 years? Why is it in Madare? That's where you find that there's a lot of issues of, water scarcity, health is a problem, accessing education is a problem. But then just across the road, Mutaiga, these are very posh area, uptown area. This is actually the diplomatic corps of Kenya. This is where you find the United Nations. This is where you find the U.S. Embassy. This is where you find all these, ambassadors from all these countries, residing, and some of the richest people in Kenya. And that is just separated by a thick road per highway. This kind of inequality existing nearly in the same geographical area, but separated by just a road, speaks, I started to become, politically agitated to try and find, I had a lot of questions in me that could not be answered by just one answer. And that's when I found that the Social Justice Center was organizing against judicial killing in Madare, which by then was very rampant. And you remember in 2013 when the Uhuru Kenyatta's government came into power, there was a lot of, them wanting to deal with organized urban crime. And that's when he started hearing a lot of youth being murdered. And Madare took control of this. And because Mathare has been, viewed with this lens of criminality from long. And it suffered a lot from extrajudicial killing because, the police wanted to use more of a shortcut to eradicate crime in urban areas. So that is where my struggle came from. It came from a point of anger. It came from a point of frustration. Me wanting, to know why this system is very unjust and what can we do to, to put everything on a level playground for all. Yeah, that's my point that I can, that's my angle that I joined the, Kenya Organic Intellectual and the Revolution Socialist League and also Mathare Justice Center, to fight for a dignified life. And actually, there is a quote by Nini, I think that really inspired me. And this is the first time when I'm being introduced. When I met my first, I met comrades from Colombia and some from Tanzania. And this is when I first read some works on Asata Shakur, started reading on Patrice Lumumba, started reading on the kind of struggle that the Black Panthers had, what the Mau Mau did, what was happening in areas such as Algeria and other places. And I somehow got inspired by all these things. I somehow got connected the dots between all these struggles from the Kenyan Mau Mau to what was happening in the Frelimo, to the what was happening in Cuba, to all this kind of struggle. And like I connected these struggles. It was an all war roll out against imperialism. And yeah, I had a part to play in it because yes, we have an independent country, but then it's more of an flag independence, so it's still under some kind of the clutches of neoliberalism and imperialism. Yeah, so that is where I am coming from.
No, thank you for that. And there are a number of points that I want to pull out, and we have other comrades who will be joining us. I know Okaka is on, and I know Gerald Kamau is on as well. Gerald, if you can hear us, you can maybe raise your hand when you're ready to kind of join the conversation, because I know everybody's in transit. This is real life type of things, right? We're trying to have a conversation as we're engaged in work. You all are in Nairobi and different parts of Nairobi. But, I think I want to back up just a little bit, because there was something that you said that I think is important for our listeners to understand. You talked about the geographical or the spatiality of Mathare, right? Being a particular place that is separated by a road, but also you have, this enormous access to wealth and the diplomatic corps. As someone who's been to Kenya, I know this particular area. I've been there many times and I've seen it myself. But just could you describe that a little bit more with the history of Mathare? Could you talk a little bit more about what produced Mathare, what produced Kibera, what produced Korogocho? Because these are part of colonial structures. These are leftover. Could you talk a little bit more about that to give our listeners a really spatialized understanding of what you're talking about?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really good point. And let me give this from a very personal perspective also. My family matriarch, or my great grandmother, came from the place called Mutaiga today. We used to do farming in Mutaiga. My family used to do farming in Mutaiga. But then when Kenya became more of a British protectorate in 1920, they started taking land that were mostly in Nairobi and the Central Highlands in Kenya. And as part of Mutaiga, which is part of the Central Highlands, my family became, they were evicted from Mutaiga and thrown out. And then Mathare was more of a quarry. And that was, I always say that it is the sweat of the people of Mathare and other informal settlement that has built what is today Mathare, both physically and, metaphorically, because and the people who used to build, used to labor to build the Nairobi CBD came from Mathare. Mathare is around 8 kilometers from Nairobi. And the opposite side is what is called Mutaiga. And I want just to paint some picture of how Mathare looks and how Mutaiga looks. Mutaiga is this lush area with a lot of trees, very green areas. It has one of the best golfing fields. Actually, there are two of them. Golfing fields, the diplomatic corps, very well paved roads and everything. Then on the opposite side is Mathare informal settlement, or let me call it a slum. That's how it's known. Mathare is this area that is around, I'm not sure about the area, but it houses around 300 to about 500,000 people. And that is more than 10% of the population that is in Mutaiga. And Mutaiga, bear in mind, it's such a large area than Mathare. You see that is one of the differences that you find in this area. That Mathare is very much smaller, but houses a bigger population of people than what is in Tega, which is actually larger. And there is a title, a book that was, a census that was done in Madare, I think in 2018 and 2019, counting the number of trees that in Madare, and find that very few trees in Madare. By this time, their trees are just countable. Like you could take maybe one tree for around 1,800 people. That was done by Oyunga Pala, together with Madare Green Movement. And on the other side is Mutaiga, which is, a very forested area. That is where you find Karura Forest. That is where you find all these kind of golfing clubs and area, where the elite can access all these kind of spaces. And it speaks to this kind of, the colonial legacy that Matare found itself in and has continued to perpetuate. And there is this notion of anti-blackness, when it comes, the city being very anti-black and very anti-family for the black communities. And Madare today exists as a place where what I've found in Madare, they're just shacks made of iron sheets and aluminum sheets. And the reason for this is during colonial times, it's only men who are allowed to reside in the city, and they only came there as workers. And that's why most of the houses were just hostel-like. And that's why you find even today that is being reproduced. When it comes to Madare, the tenements that are there in Madare and Korogocho and these other areas, they're just very small single rooms, which are just like hostel-like, because they were not meant to house black families in the CBD. Yes, you are here to build Nairobi CBD. You are here to, your sweat and blood to build this beautiful city. But then after that, you have to get out of the city for those who belong to the city, who are actually white, to be there. And then there's something also funny with how Nairobi is. You'll always find that, yes, there is, on one side, there is, you find that in a way that a rich suburb area is close to a poor neighborhood such as Madare. You'll find that there is Karen and then there is Kibera. There is Mudaiga, then there is Madare. There is Lavington, there is Kilelesi, Kawangware. You find that every rich suburb has a poor neighborhood next to it. And you find that it is these poor people from this neighborhood who sell their labor to these rich suburbs. They're the one who maintain, the social kind of, they allow social reproduction to happen in these areas. Yet for them, it is not regarded as if they're really working, and also they're really viewed with some kind of lens that does not take in consideration the kind of work that they give into these rich suburbs. And then there is also the notion of Nairobi, being divided into two, both the Westland and the Eastlands. And you find during the colonial times, we had the colonial settlers, or settling on one side of Nairobi, which is the western side of Nairobi, which is actually well drained. It's on highland. So, and then in the middle, there is the Asian communities, which acted as a buffer zone between the black communities and the white communities. And then on the furthest end of the, of Nairobi, now the Nairobi Eastland, that's where you find all these kind of, Mathare, Kibera, Dandora, which were, not well drained, and that's were much prone to floods. And that is a kind of, something that has continued to be replicated. You find that the rich now stays in Westland, and then the poor to stay in this area such as Eastland. And then you'll find that nowadays we'll find maybe more of middle class a bit, and maybe Asian and Somali communities being in the middle, actually still, perpetuating the buffer zone thing that has been existing for long. And that is how Nairobi has existed, continuing, to reproduce this kind of inequality and social inequality that were there, that were racially stratified, during the colonial times.
Thank you for talking about that. I want to be able to, our comrade Okaka is ready to join into the conversation. You could jump right in, Okaka. Please, by all means, just introduce yourself, any organizational affiliations, and and kind of talk about your politicization that you had as well.
Yes, greetings everybody. I'm Okaka Onyango, community organizer with the Kawale Community Justice Center. I also team up as a communication strategist for the social justice movement Nairobi chapter. By extension, I'm also an organic intellectual with the Revolutionary Socialist League. And with that said, is that most of what I do is try to organize not only offline but online. So I also do a lot of digital organizing, and that's particularly my space of, I'd say, great contribution to the struggle. Other than that, is that as an organic intellectual, what we try to do is write our day-to-day experiences and stories that we experience in the our informal settlements, the ghettos. And with this is that we try to raise the consciousness of the people through our offense. That has always been political education. So with this regard, we share a lot of activities together with regards to anti-imperialism. We use a lot of art in this regard. That would be the use of graffiti, the use of theater, by use of music and songs of struggle, among other things. So this has been actually our space of organizing, and that's how we actually try to contribute to just try and kill the empire. Other than that, I really don't have much to say, but I'm very much open to any kind of questions or remarks that may arise from today's topic, actually.
Thank you for that. And could you talk a little bit more of, how you became, involved in the movement, your politicization? What was it? Was it the political education? Was it reading Patrice Lumumba? Was it meeting Pan-Africanism? What is it that, or just were you just upset? Like Kathanga said, he was mad. Which is also a very, very important entry point into movement, right?
Yes, indeed. We're always told that for every action there is a reaction, and probably for me, I feel I came out of this reaction, a reaction against oppression, a reaction to resist the continued brutality under this system. And for me, I feel that's more than just being jolted out of rage, but it's more of having the spirit of Lumumba inside me, having the spirit of Dedan Kimathi inside me, having the spirit of Mekatilili inside me, having the spirit of people like Amilcar Cabral inside us. And this, of course, is pegged on even more scientific analysis that also has been able to trace, trauma is something that can be passed down through the genetics and generations. It is something that gets coded inside our being, our very being. And so for more than 500 years of being in slavery, more than 500 years of being tortured, more than 500 years of continued oppression is something that also kind of begs for a reaction and a reaction to resist. And I feel like most of the time this is part of the history that is mostly neglected, that Africans have been able to actually resist some of this oppression. For me, I feel I'm actually being guided also by the spirit of our freedom fighters and the spirit of our martyred comrades, the spirit of socialism, to try and reach that society that is equal and gives dignity to everyone.
And Kathanga was talking about the spatial, kind of like the layout of oppression. You talk about violence, you talk about the trauma that's inherited. While it is carried in the human body, in mind and in body, it's also carried out specifically in the geographical spatial layout of colonialism, right? Could you talk a little bit about the space that you are organizing in, to kind of give our listeners, because again, most people are familiar, but they never had a chance to come to Nairobi or come to Kenya, but give people kind of like that particular space that you're kind of organizing. I know you said digital space, but in the spaces off digital space, because we know what the digital space look like. It's a mess. So, also colonial, but also but talk about a little bit about that space that you organize in, the physical space.
Yeah, the physical space is very, very, very contested. Because like for this particular occasion, I'd say even to today, we are experiencing a lot of civil liberties being drawn back. East Africa is now turning out to be, another dictatorial fascist regime. You can see Tanzania government, the Tanzanian state is actually at war with its activists. It's at war with its opposition. It is at war with intellectuals, and this experience is not something new. We continue to experience it root of the brutal regime. And for us is that for more than 60 years that we've been able to, kind of sit down and say that we got our paper independence. The truth is that we continue to experience the same kind of brutalities that were there during the colonial period. There's no single day that I walk freely with my dreadlocks and I don't get stopped by cops trying to, apply Gestapo tactics on me. And this is the kind of reality for so many other youths around Nairobi, around our hood, our estates where we live. And there is this kind of a form of like apartheid, just the same way Gadang was talking about when you look at some of these informalized ghettos. They're usually encampments that go way back to the formation during the colonial period. And these are mostly constituted of most of the people who have been dispossessed of their land. So when you see us here, most of us, these are some critical issues that we continue to raise because we have no claim to any land. This is the kind of reality that we are always exposed to. So we are always pegged on to, move out and go and offer our labor to somebody else who will always be willing to exploit us, one or the other. And to say the least that even in these spaces, some of the basic social safetiness are not available. Things like water is a total mess. Though it's a guarantee in the Constitution, but it just seems like the law only works for the rich. Things like having medicine at hospitals. If by any chance I was to fall sick today, God forbid, it would be really terrible because thinking to going to any public hospital is tantamount to being suicidal, there's no any kind of help you can get there. And same is the thing with sanitation. Housing is very terrible. We live in these shacks where if you cough a bit, you can your neighbor can actually hear you. It is this kind of situation that leaves you so dispossessed and dignified and with so much shame that it reaches that point where you just have to do nothing else but fight back. And it starts from a point of feeling that, okay, at times you're low, but then you transform this into rage. And of course, this happens through a constant raising of political consciousness and having this rage now harnessed in a way that is not, kind of channeled through horizontal violence. Then we turn it into a force that is an organized force, a critical mass that is able to, fight back and reclaim what it's actually owed. So for me, that's the kind of spaces that we organize in. The space is very brutal. A lot of police abuse of power takes place on a daily basis. There's a constant dispossession, either or looming evictions, or a crisis, climate catastrophe crisis like floods, just killing people, having those kind of long famines that leave people in a way that you're forced to sell off whatever it is little space that you occupied to somebody else who comes from another faraway land abroad and continues to rob you of the little space that you have. So we continue to fight back. We continue to tell people that there is importance in actually occupying these spaces to take over power, not only in the land but also in the industries, the places of work where they are. And so far so good. I believe we'll win this war. Viva.
Yeah. So Kathenga, did you have anything to add, or did you want to extend or expand on what Okaka mentioned?
Not really, but I think just something that I had forgotten to mention about Mathare. There are a lot of informal settlements in Nairobi. And, Mathare being 100 years old, there is the biggest one, which is Kibra. Kibra is the biggest. But there is how Mathare is viewed with a lens of criminality. And it stems from, let me just suppose Mathare and Kibra, for that people understand. Kibra is the biggest Nini, there is crime, same as Mathare. But then, how Kibra came to be formed is that after the soldiers fought for, there is the King African Rifles, soldiers being taken in World War I and World War II to go and fight for the, for the crown against Germans in Tanzania. And also some of them went to Burma to fight for the, for the crown. So after them coming back, they were Nubians from Sudan. So what happened then is that they were given Kibra, the area, as a token for the good that they had done. Then Madare was formed, soldiers who had also fought, but now they were from central Kenya. They came back, found that the land had been taken by by the crown and made more of a white highland thing. So most of them lacking a place where, land being a primary source of production, them lacking that and also being subjected to taxes, such as house tax and, being told to pay these taxes, they had to come in the city to, to find some form of sustenance. So most of them came to Madare because it was close to the CBD. And these were the radicalization of the Madare people began. When these soldiers came back and, they started now mingling with the people who are living in Madare. And that's why, actually, there's a book. I just shared a link of the book. It's called Madare and Abar Battle of Anti-Oppression Struggle. It speaks about this history of resistance in Madare. Madare has been, more of this vanguard of organizing since colonial times. Not just now, it started the colonial times. And that way, see, when the Mau Mau or Kenya Land and Freedom Army were organizing in the CBD, due to the surveillance that was there, they shifted their organizing in Madare. Madare now became, this urban area where Mau Mau, strategists were organizing from. And it is from this, them being labeled, and so the people of Madare were being labeled as criminals because most of the people in Madare were working in Taiga. And when they did that, most of them, even the nannies, will steal guns, will steal anything that will find useful. They'll steal them from Taiga and bring them in Madare before they were dispatched to Aberdare and Mount Kenya Forest. So Madare, by that time, our women were described as prostitutes, and our most of the sons were described as criminals because they will go to Mutaiga and bring all these things, and then these all resources will be dispatched to Aberdare Forest and Mount Kenya, where the Kenya Land and Freedom Army soldiers were concentrated in. And then this lens of criminality has been used to view Madare up to now. We find that, yes, there is a lot of, the same condition exists in Madare, Kayole, Dandora, but then Madare has this special focus, it being with a lens of criminality. And that's why you find that during the 1982, during the 1952, the houses were raised down by the then Sir Evelyn Berlin. He raised down the house in Madare using fire. And, it speaks to this, when in other areas, eviction were happening, this resident being told, this area will be evicted. It happened in other settlements where residents were evicted. And for you to be evicted, they were told, okay, we'll evict you, so you'll have to carry your things. But then it's a different thing when the authority comes early in the morning and just decide to raise down your belongings. It's more of like erasing your history. It's different from when you're told now you have to evict this area because you cannot continue living here. It speaks to that less of criminality that the Madare people have been viewed with. And that has continued also with the first Jomo Kenyatta government when it came into power. There's still a lot of pressure for Madare people to be evicted from the area. In 1982 attempted coup, a lot of people the Moi Air Base, which is just opposite Madare, there was an attempted coup, but then those who suffered the brutality of the regime, Moi's regime, were the people of Madare. We found that in 2003, when Kibaki came, now the third, regime came into power, there's a lot of crackdown on Mungiki. The Mungiki is more of a sect that was organizing against the government. But then some of the concentration were either in Kayole, where Rogers has been organizing, or in Madare. But then Madare paid a hefty, price for, because they were organizing in this area. 2014, Uhuru comes into place. The same organizing happening, most also with the COVID-19. We find that Madare, there's a time actually it reached the point that Madare, we had lost a lot of people due to police brutality during the COVID-19 than due to COVID-19. And that's when we decided to march in the street. So there is this lens of criminality that Madare has been viewed with since colonial times up to now. And it occupies this area of, criminality, where they say these are places where drugs are peddled. These where they call our women, our women prostitutes or commercial sex workers, and also they call our sons, criminals. And that has been passed from the colonial government until today. And that is why Madare occupies a very central role in organizing in Nairobi and also Kenya at large.
That places the importance and also this notion of criminality is something that that colonialists and the imperialists often use to dehumanize the people, the communities that they're intending to exploit and practice genocide as their, as the ultimate expression of their disdain for the people that's in the spaces that they're trying to conquer. I want to shift a little bit, not too much, but just kind of center our conversation, because what you both are talking about is this notion or an idea of a consciousness development that is rooted in political education. This shift, what I'm saying here is I want to turn attention to Patrice Lumumba's Pan-Africanism, the idea of the Congo being a central important place in African liberation struggles that does not displace the struggles of Nairobi, the struggles of the Land and Freedom Army, but places it in a continuity of Pan-African activity to engage the whole African world towards fighting for liberation. So with that being said, what does Patrice Lumumba's Pan-Africanism mean to you? And we'll start with Okaka. How do we understand Patrice Lumumba's Pan-Africanism in the context of the work that you're engaged in? And how does Patrice Lumumba fit into the political education process?
I think the struggle of Patrice Lumumba is something that is very much at the heart of the party. And that being said, it is no coincidence that we were able to sit down and sit with that we developed even our idea of a political school around the name, because we picked this up from Piogama Pinto, who was also a socialist, who was very much involved in the Mau Mau struggle, and with him he developed a Lumumba Institute, which was supposed to offer political education to Kenya. I can't remember the name for KANU, the emerging party at the time, to give political education to the young youths who are joining the party, so that they are able to be good quality cadres who can offer the great development to the country. So this same idea is something that I take critically through the kind of history we've been able to learn about Africa. And for us to be able to grasp with all these contexts, to be able to understand the genesis of how this oppression actually came to the Congo. And if you're able to look through some of our political education files that we've been able to post, even just as recently as yesterday on Sir Morton Stanley. Morton Stanley was this Victorian kind of praised explorer, and if you look in the history books, is so much held for discovering the Congo and some of these other spaces in Africa. But in real sense, what he was actually doing was maiming, killing, and destroying communities. In some of these memoirs, you see him even calling Africans as savages, as he moves and traverses through the jungle. And in certain instances, you also see him enjoying the murder of, a company of warriors, African warriors. And through this expedition, he goes on instilling some of these ideals and the kind of crusade that you're always exposed to, that Europeans were here to civilize us and bring us out of this barbarism. So further, kind of do a further analysis of him and understand that he was actually even, very much sent to endear and install the Belgian rule through King Leopold. And this was his role. And these are some of the histories that actually Lumumba was able to learn and listen through as he grew up as a boy. It was not very easy for him to actually be able to access education, because most of the time during those colonial period, people were being offered like an hour's time of only reading through books, but most of the time was spent on what I'd actually referred to as child labor, because it was more of farming and being sent into the fields. But for him, his passion to and always zeal to be inquisitive and trying to understand the society that he was being brought up in actually pushed him through to also learn other languages, Swahili being one of them, the Bakongo language of course the Congolese people, and the other one should have been French, I believe. And going forward is that he'd later grow and move closer to the city, get and joined with many other groups of young comrades who were also at that time agitating for the people's freedom. And slowly, through this kind of culture, through this kind of history, we see him being jolted and moving forth to even becoming a journalist, writing poems on magazines, and continuing on to educate the masses about the oppression. And this is the kind of thing that we also try to emulate inside our party, to continue using whatever it is propaganda tools, whether online or offline, to continue raising the consciousness of the people. I believe this is more or less the kind of spirit that we also look forward to, even when we engage with our friends from the diaspora. The kind of zeal that is very much pegged on continuous raising of the people's consciousness, trying to bring that kind of proletarian clarity that is able to bring change and revolution, the same way Patrice Lumumba reflected on Africa, And this is something that we are also looking forward to continue deducing on how best can we be able to, imagine a society that is full of freedom for all of us. What is total liberation? You understand? And for me, I see it in a way that is not extractivist, even as it forged forward towards socialism. It doesn't have to be one that destroys the ecological limits that nature actually provides. And for this instance, I look towards to Congo for this kind of reflection, because it is being pillaged today by capitalism. We understand the kind of minerals that are actually found there. It is, amounts of minerals. And by constantly keep on digging in and extracting it from the ground is pillaging that land. Congo hosts one of the largest forests in the world, and these are the lungs of us living. So these kind of spaces and environment need to be protected. And for me, this is the kind of vision that I see even when I reflect with Patrice Lumumba: a zeal of resistance, a zeal of not being scared, and constantly pushing on to not only cultivate in isolation, but being in a group of members and comrades and raising that critical mass that is able to bring change that we all desire.
Thank you for that. So, Katanga, I wanted to pull you in, but our comrade Gerald, I think, is ready to kind of jump in really quick. So we just want to make a little bit of space, and then we'll go to you, Katanga, for you to, Gerald, please, by all means, introduce yourself, any institutional formations that you're engaged with, organizing, and also your politicization as well.
Hello, comrades. Our area is a bit dark because apparently the light is all down. We have a power blackout in our area. But my name is Gerard Kamau. I'm from Kayole Community Justice Center. And also I'm part of Revolutionary Socialist League. I also organize with the Land and Ecological Justice Committee in the Nairobi chapter. Also, I'm a part of the Organic Intellectual Network. What I wanted to add is that Kayole is in the east of Nairobi, and when I started joining the movement, I realized that majority of the youths including me, we were being subjected into like arbitrary arrest and profiling and criminalization. And there was a certain criminal gang that was operating in Kayole called Gaza Gang. The Gaza Gang was used by political elites to grab land, to abduct people, to just commit offenses against any opposers. So they were able to grab a big chunk of land belonging to a prominent politician but rich, was called Kirema. So his land was being grabbed by these criminal gangs. And for us, we were not belonging to the gang, but at the same time, we were still facing brutality and arbitrary arrest and criminalization. We were being told that they are your brothers, so you know them. So we were subjected to those profiling, and we were able to participate in social justice centers march called the Sabasaba March for Our Life in 2018. And in 2018, we did a successful march against police brutality. And in 2019, we participated in the Stop the Bullet KE, the same Sabasaba the next year. So at that time, we were still not familiar with how movements organizes. But in 2020, that's where the movement started facing like this donor dependency. The NGOs were coming into our organization, pumping in money so that people could be disrupted, and those were some of the things that we are facing in the movement. That's where we came up with different comrades and decided to document our own stories in reflections, the organic intellectuals. So we were able to critique how the NGOs were coming into our movement, and our view on how we see the NGOs. Right now, we have been able to document and able to publish through the organic intellectual. That's how I got engaged in the movement. I'm very passionate about ecological justice, and during 2019, that's when we realized that even the food that we are eating here in Kenya, most of it is GMO and hybrid seeds. So we on how we can counter the coming into our society. And at that time, that's when we realized that surely land is a critical aspect of our struggle. We didn't see it that way at that time, but right now we really know that land is critical to our survival, and we are continuing to organize.
Well, thank you for that. And we'll pull you into the conversation, particularly around Lumumba and the idea of the importance of the Congo. Scientifically, we know that the Congo, and I think Okaka mentioned this, if the Congo was left to develop without outside influences and support, the idea that it actually could feed the world multiple times over, right? You know, the land and all of those things. But I wanted to, pull in, Tanga, this notion of Lumumba's Pan-Africanism and how it informs the work that you're doing. Again, most of you all are doing complementary work. And this is the thing I like about all of you. You all are doing complementary work and connecting, continuing extensions that seems to be different, but it all is extensions of Black freedom or African freedom. And that's one of the things I've been paying attention to all of you guys' work over the past number of years. Been going to Kenya for even longer than that, bringing 25, 26 students with me, going into Kibera and particular places. But one of the things I think that is those who are engaged in the movement, particularly outside of in the United States itself, can learn from how you all organize, the different, not different, but the continuities of your struggles, right? I think that is something that, I want to give you all props, in public for that. But sorry, I just wanted to say that, but could think of, please, by all means, any reflections on Patrice Lumumba, consciousness raising and the organizing that you're doing as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, James. And, for me, when I hear of Patrice Lumumba and I hear of DRC, DRC occupies this, central geographical area in Africa. For those who are not familiar with the African map, and for me, I see DRC as the heart of Africa. You know, like quite literally, it occupies the center of Africa, and the heart. When I say the heart, comparing it metaphorically to it being the heart, when the heart pumps blood, that blood has to reach every part of the organ. And so whatever happens in DRC affects the whole continent as a whole. Because if you look in Africa, this is where there's the greatest concentration of minerals. It's in DRC. And that's why, when Patrice Lumumba was assassinated by the imperialist forces, there's something they say that this is one of the, most important assassination of the 20th century because they knew, a free Congo will mean a very free Africa. And it speaks this to this notion of, yes, African states, we got our independence, but it was more of a flag independence. Yes, Kenya, we got our independence, but then we had to choose whether to be, to align ourselves with the imperialist forces. And for me, Patrice Lumumba speaks to this, the notion of, total liberation. And I say total liberation, I'm speaking about, us being able to get our, economic power into our own hands. Because without economic power, political power, cannot be really exercised. When, and that speaks to, to this notion of the continuity of the empire through, them holding our economic, our economic instruments to themselves. And if you look at what happened in South Africa, if you look at what happened in Kenya, with the Comprado class, Jomo Kenyatta gets into power and then he is compromised and then he chooses, capitalism over socialism. The same thing happens with the South African, the economic charter. Nelson Mandela gets into power, but then he is compromised. Yes, they get the political freedom that they wanted, but then the economic instruments of the South African people still remain with a few minority people, and that has continued to be perpetuated until today. During the Independence Day, that was on 30th June 1960, if I'm not wrong, and Patrice Lumumba was not slotted to speak during this day, yet he was to be the prime minister. And I think Joseph Kasavubu was supposed to be the president. But then the Belgian crown decided that, Patrice Lumumba did not speak on this because he was considered more of a radical. And he went ahead and defied that and he gave his speech because one thing, he knew that, the president who was being chosen by that time, he had compromised. And this is what you see also with the African states, at independence during this 1957 when Ghana, 1957 or 59 when Ghana got independence to around 1960s when these other African states were, actually active on, the independence struggle. What was happening is that the colonial powers were organizing which people to take over the countries. And that's when you see, me linking what was happening in Congo to what happened actually in Kenya. You find that Jomo Kenyatta was prepared by the colonial power by then to take over power. And him being taken over to be part of Category 6 was part of this plan by the CIA and, the imperialist forces so that he may come in and be the president and so that he may not disrupt some of the things that were supposed to be done. Because if Dedan Kimathi were to take power by that, then one of the things that was at the forefront was freedom and redistribution of land. And by this time, Kenya is not industrialized. So our economic power came from agriculture and land. And they made sure that land could not be distributed. And when Patrice Lumumba comes into power, they wanted to continue with this kind of, them holding the country, the economic instruments of the DRC people into their hands because they knew with economic, power being into their hands, they will control the political perspective. So for me, Lumumba spoke to this, the power of, Africans being able to liberate and emancipate themselves completely. And when he gave his speech, it really angered, the king from the Belgium and the delegation from the Belgium, and they felt that, okay, this person needs to be dealt with. And that's why you see, after that, Patrice Lumumba, becoming now the prime minister and, DRC has gotten his power, you find that now the CIA comes in to help the Belgian people. And this speaks, when the interests of the imperialists are threatened anywhere, they always come together to unite against any forces. Yes, they have their own differences against themselves, among themselves. But then when the interest of one, of one of the people gets threatened, they will always come together and, fight to the tooth to make sure that, that they get what they wanted, because they felt that DRC did not only serve the Belgian people and the Belgian crown, but also the imperial forces around the globe, which US included, UK and France. All of them felt that relinquishing the, DRC and its wealth to these people was like relinquishing the rest of Africa, because and yeah, that's why they had tried, through there's this guy called, was it Kasa Vumbu, or there's this guy from Congo. There is the Moise Shombe who are being propped up, and to bring the Katanga secession politics, because Katanga is one of the richest, the rich mineral areas in DRC. Them being propped to secede from the larger DRC, which had somehow to some extent been supporting Patrice Lumumba. They tried that, but it failed. But then they had to play with the internal politics of the DRC people, them delivering, Patrice Lumumba to some of the people who felt that they didn't like him, so that he might be killed. And it speaks to this notion of, these forces uniting themselves whenever they are threatened anywhere. And that's why for us who are in the left, for us who are organizing from the global south, it's always, it is not like we have an option. We have to unite against the imperialist forces, because for them, they're already united in their, in propelling the agenda. So for us, we cannot afford to fight in different functions. That's why for me, it's always, Patrice Lumumba brings reminds me of this, the unfinished revolution that was thwarted in Africa. And it was thwarted in a way that we were given a flag independence, but then we never fought to the tooth to liberate our economic tools. And for me, that is what Patrice Lumumba speaks to. And that is why, for me, while organizing, we have to organize with all manner of people from the global south, those who are, those who are dehumanized in all this everywhere in the world. And I think there is notion about by Paulo Freire. He speaks about, our struggle being the struggle for us to humanize ourselves, because we are born in a society that we've already been dehumanized by, the colonial powers, then through the Crom Prado, and also what I call more of the residues of the empires who remained in Africa. They still continue to dehumanize us. So for us, it is a struggle to humanize our existence as a people. And for me, that has always been the case, because what Patrice Lumumba wanted for the people of DRC is for them to humanize themselves, for them to live, enjoying the fruit that DRC has offered unto them. But then looking at the context of today, the DRC people continue to be one of the poorest countries in the world, yet these are places that has very, some of the richest minerals that are there. The imperialist forces are now speaking about, the shift to, clean energy, and all this will be powered by cobalt and tin and, the tantalum mineral that are there in the DRC. And again, these places, DRC, in another war that is coming, because now we are saying we have to, decarbonize our transport system. We have, to decarbonize every system, of our society. And so, that also again brings DRC into focus, and we have to really organize against the imperialist forces. They want the batteries, and the batteries will be made from DRC. Apple wants, cobalt, the phones and, our phones and laptops have to be made by the, the sweat from the people, the child miners who are in DRC, those who are exploited in DRC, the women. And that's why, for me, I always want to debunk the notion, there's this notion that is being perpetuated by the imperialist forces, that there is a notion like something like a resource scarce country. Like all the countries that have, rich in resources they have a resource scarce. But then it's not really a resource scarce that is there. It's the imperialist forces forcing you to fight against each other and pitting you against each other, so that while you fight each other, and, they loot your minerals, they loot your country and dehumanize you. So Patrice Lumumba speaks to the total freedom of our continent and speaks to the total revolution that we never got to finish. Yeah, for me, so speaks to the unfinished revolution, which also in Kenya, we always say that the Mau Mau was unfinished revolution, which we have to continue up to today.
No, that's right. I think that you're making, your points, particularly that false idea of resource curse. Akaka, I saw you come back on screen. Did you want to extend anything that Katanga mentioned?
Yes, of course. And for the particular question of what actually Lumumba symbolizes, it is far much more than just, the usual anti-imperialist struggle, but the symbol of sovereignty. And when you look throughout his life, he used the idea of total independence in a way that it is not about just pulling down the colonial flag, but actually ensuring that the system in place that actually dominates and uses political puppetry and is violent in repression is actually thwarted and transformed. And for me, I see Lumumba embodying the fire of revolutionary Pan-Africanism, even as we reflect on the upcoming Africa Liberation Day in a week's time. So this is a dream that is rooted in justice. For me, I see Lumumba as that symbol of unity and liberation from all forms of continuous imperialist exploitation. He continues to remind us that true independence, of course, is more than just being able to have rosy and lofty speeches. As an organic intellectual who's actually rooted in the people's daily struggles, I see Lumumba not as a distant hero, but also more like a comrade who believed deeply in the power of the masses. And through his speeches, you can even see him continuously asking for these kind of material things that the people require. When he says, without dignity, there can be no liberty. Without justice, there can be no dignity. And without independence, there can never be free men. And surely, even after all of us getting the so-called proper independence, we still find ourselves undignified, still find ourselves chatting through these murky waters of the brutal capitalist system. In his speeches, when he talks about the day will come when history will speak, we are now doing that speaking. We are now putting ink into paper and writing the African history. When he talks about Africa will write its own history, this is actually now doing it through the Organic Intellectuals Network, And furthermore, it testifies that, and it will be a history of glory and dignity. And I will understand about the African proverb that always says that when the hunter continues to write the story of the hunt, always the lion will always find the story at the far end of the stick, because the story also glorify the hunter. And for us, we want to stop that from happening, because a lot of these stories, like the one I talked about of Morton Stanley, when you look in the history books, you see him even being immortalized in a way that the imperialist forces create this kind of busts and statues glorifying a murderer, someone who was genocidal and a total racist. So for us, we also need to continue rewriting our history in a way that it also praises our heroes, people like Lumumba. We understand that they tried to actually raise him, but we keep on invoking his spirit. The only thing that now actually comes to mind as I speak about Lumumba is that the path of revolution is always long. Of course, it's treacherous, because you can see on how he was actually even tormented later on as he tried to see on how he can win freedom for his people. And of course, it's costly because it costs his life, but at the end of the day, it is very necessary. He cannot run away from it. And his vision continues to fuel our organizing in our poor neighborhoods. And our resistance to neocolonial governance continues every day. And we are continuously committed to, building alternative institutions that are rooted in the will of the people. Lumumba Institute inside the Revolution Socialist League as the political school continues to raise the political clarity of the masses. And I feel like in the face of the continued assassinations that we are seeing right now taking place in Kenya, the kind of repression taking place in East Africa, in Uganda, in Tanzania, the kind of bloody wars taking place in Sudan, the kind of pseudo kind of proxy was taking place in Haiti, kind of tells us that we don't need to continue mourning. It's time for us to organize, and we don't need to fear anymore to fight.
we're witnessing, and I think it's probably a good opportunity for us to pause the conversation. I want to honor your time because it's late there. It's midday here. And again, this is just one conversation that's going to be opening up into other work that I'm engaged in, and other, and I say I as a collective, the collective of us, and also really making substantive connections with the work that each of you are engaged in individually, but also collectively. We're witnessing capitalism in crisis, right? We're witnessing the logic of capitalism that is literally destroying the earth, the ecological system that we live in, right? I want us to kind of think about this, move to a pause in our conversation. I want each of you to kind of think about the relationship between the ecological crisis of capitalism, because getting free also requires us to be able to redefine our relationship to nature as well. So that's an important component, the ecological, literal, the geographical, global climate change, and those type of things. We can get free, but if we don't have food, you see what I'm saying? If we don't have, the relationship with our land, land that we actually can utilize to sustain us. Could you talk a little bit about what you envision, or what is the vision of a new society and the relationship between the land question and also the creating a global commons of resistance? We talk about Pan-Africanism in its historical context, but what does Pan-Africanism look like in our new society? I know it's a broad question. I know we're not going to figure it out all at this, right now.
Yeah.
But,
No, no worries.
yeah.
You're always ready to take this conversation wherever it takes us when you get the time, because it's always interesting also to have this kind of discussions, because it also compiles as part of our analysis to the current class struggle that we are always committed to in the grassroots. And that particularly being said, around food sovereignty is that this is a very key issue that we are trying very much to hammer, even inside our own organizing, because most of the people in the left don't see the issue around the climate catastrophe as something that actually deserves explicit mention, even in forums. So for us, being more of I'd say ecological justice advocates, we try to center in that there is even a far more fierce enemy than capitalism itself, and this is climate catastrophe. And that being said, you can actually look even geographically, even how Africa is positioned around the world. It has more than 65% of arable land worldwide. You see, so Africa actually fills the world. Secondly, it has more than 30% of mineral deposits for the entire globe. The other thing also is that it has more than 12% of, I believe, all reserves of the world. So in itself, when you talk about sovereignty, is that Africa is able to can be able to depend on itself, defend itself, and conduct business on its own terms with all these resources at its disposal. But we have this issue of corporate takeover, and just like Gadanga mentioned, this kind of unfinished revolution and a betrayed revolution that has actually been able to take course. And we see most of these arable lands have not been actually relinquished and given back to the Africans even after the independence. Most of them are still very much at the hands of the aggressors who came from very far-flung areas to come and snatch them from us. And they continue this exploitation through many other gimmicks and policies that are being, passed through legislation to continue dispossessing the poor people. So the issue around climate crisis is that, as we can all see right now, it is a subject that is, very, very, very key and sensitive, that we need to have it constantly at the back of our minds when we discuss issues of exploitation, because we see our brothers and sisters today out running to Europe to try and see how they can get greener pastures there, and they end up dying in the seas and the oceans the same way the slave trade came here, shuttled them, and was throwing them into the ocean and
killing them. So we are having a graveyard again being created of Africans trying to run away from the same crisis that is being created by capitalism. So this kind of burst of exploitation that is taking place as I call it kind of a climate apartheid needs to be mentioned, needs to be at the forefront in all struggles, because it's something that not only affects us now, but will be very critical even as we discuss about our future generations. We are having, record-long droughts that have never been experienced before. We're experiencing floods in far way, serious way that never envisioned that they could happen. And most of the people who are at the receiving end of all this catastrophe are the marginalized, are the poor people. The constant corporate takeover that continues under the pretext of these false solutions in the name of smart farms, in the name of carbon credits, in the name of carbon tax and all these other lies. Are just new ways of trying to see on how the rich can actually be able to dispossess the poor, because for most of the African people, we still rely so much on land as, our basic means of production. And without land, freedom is nothing. Without land, freedom is nothing. You cannot be able to produce, you cannot be able to have subsistence for yourself, you cannot be able to even have a dignified kind of living, because at the end of the day, even when you die, you're just buried in a way that is not dignifying. You are thrown in a cemetery with many other people, and you're left there in a way that doesn't speak to the essence of the African people and how we've been conducting ourselves, the business on how of even respecting our dead. So these are some of the critical issues that continue to emerge amongst even the peasants as we struggle with the issues of corporates trying to, force down on us GMO foods that are disruptive to the plants, kill away the natural ecosystems, the bees, the kind of fertilizers that actually kill the soil and leave it barren. And at the end of it all, the poor is dispossessed in a way that they are forced to sell this land, maybe out of certain societal pressures, like maybe taking kids to school and stuff like that. And most of the time, the person who comes to buy this land and also, at a throwaway price is somebody who's reflected on as an investor. And this investor takes away your land, leaves you dispossessed, you working for them, and it's slavery all over again. So this is the kind of thing that we need to continue advocating, that it's taking place in inside Africa. We need to have that kind of universal solidarity from all over the world, because this is something that Lumumba also stressed about, that the moment people understand that we are in solidarity with them in terms of bringing down the empire, then people from Asia, people from the global south will be able to join this vehicle with us and continue on, with the strive towards bringing in a new system. And with that, maybe perhaps I'd feel the question on Congo is really very sad that it continues to happen that way. We understand America became a superpower because of the minerals that they extracted from Congo. So without Congo, they could not be able to be whatever it is that they are today. And with the new technological emergence of the modernity, with the kind of the EVs that are coming to play and all that stuff, all these metals and minerals, just as Gadango was mentioning, are being extracted from Congo. And the saddest part is that even children are dying in mines. You're seeing a lot of proxy wars being played by the West to try and continue killing people, the innocent poor inside Congo. And the question of Congo needs to be taken with a lot of weight, so that we see on how best we can be able to, kill off capitalism. Because if we liberate Congo, then capitalism will definitely crumble all over the world.
No, thank you for that. And I could think as we begin to kind of again pause our conversation, we often know what we're struggling against, but do we really understand what we're struggling for? And so this notion of a new society, I think, is very important in what it looks like. So, as we kind of close out, I'll give you the final closing thoughts of our pausing thoughts of our conversation. Any reflection on what this new society can look like.
A new society, I would center it on Ubuntu. And, we've spoken a lot about Ubuntu. You are because you are. That's a community that we envision. And Ubuntu speaks to this kind of, communal kind of living, us caring for each other and us caring for the environment. And that is what we've lacked at the essence, at the basic level. And I always want to connect Ubuntu with Ujamaa and Utu. So like more of a triplet, Utu, Ubuntu, and Ujamaa. Utu means, being humane. And then there is the notion of Ujamaa, which is more of the African kind of socialism that we had envisioned, that Tanzania tried. And for me, a society that is built on Ubuntu is a society that respects, minorities, is a society that respects the environment, and is a society that, prioritizes the community instead of self. And this, I think, for me, will be, more of, it will bring, there is this intersectional struggle that we've had on whether on equality, class, gender, race, and everything. It is a tool, to fight this struggle that we've had from a very African perspective, from a perspective that Patrice Lumumba was trying to build. And for me, this could be, Ubuntu could be the tool or the manner in which you organize, to bring these breaks, to what is happening now, which I consider more of, the issue with carbon credits happening around the world, also in Africa, which I consider as the Berlin Conference 2.0. Because whatever is happening now, the partitioning of different lands, be it Serengeti being sold by Tanzanian, Ruto selling our Mau complex and other areas, is more of like the Berlin Conference, but now in a more, driven not now by the political path, but now by the the owners, the capital owners, by monopolies around the world, and this could bring an end to that. Also, I'm looking the notion of Ubuntu bringing, trying to organize around that. Also speaking to the notion, how do we bring an end to, the innocent militarization in Africa? We've had, Africa being militarized by, foreign bases. In Kenya, we hold the Batuk British Army Training Unit in Kenya. We hold the U.S. In Manda, Malindi, and Manda Bay, and also they want to construct another on the northern Kenya. There's a lot of, is it Djibouti Marite, which holds a lot of, this kind of military complexes. We want to live in a country that preaches peace and lives for peace. Not, on one end, preaching peace through the UN and all this blah blah talk they always have, and then on the other hand, people are arming themselves with nuclears every day, and trying to intensify their precision munition, whether interballistic missiles or whether nuclear. Pardon me. We are looking for something that is really peaceful, and peace is not just the absence of war. We cannot say because Kenya, we have no war that we are peaceful. A society needs a lot of things for it to be considered peaceful. It has a society that respects human rights, that respects all people from all walks of life. Also, Ubuntu has to speak to the issue of food and seeds colonization, which has been happening in Africa. We are speaking about food sovereignty. When our foods are being controlled by a few monopolies, which actually control a lot of wealth more than some countries, we become very vulnerable because we have no say in this. It has to speak to issues of environment, the kind of food we eat, and also, trying to speak to the issue, the burdens of climate change that are being now brought to Africans, because you can see how there's a lot of, movement of electronic waste. So that's an area that I have a lot of interest in. Me trying to connect that cobalt is mined in DRC, under very exploitative labor, using most child labor. It being shipped, that labor being shipped all the way to somewhere in China, in a factory in China, where labor is cheap and things are made there. And then the manufactured product, most of them end up somewhere in Europe or the US. And then after the end life is done, they again brought back into Ghana and Nairobi, Accra or Nairobi, as, secondary or second-hand electronic goods. We have to speak to these issues of, who will cause the burden of climate change, because we find that those who continue to cause the burden are those who, contributed very little to it. And for me, I will say Ubuntu speaks to a society that is founded on social justice and respect and dignity for humanity.
No, thank you for that. And thank you both. I know it's getting late there, and I think it's probably a good time for us to pause our conversation. This has been a very robust conversation that I know listeners will be able to get much out of, and you've provided a lot of avenues for to expanding and extending our thinking and consciousness. One of the things I wanted to do with this series is to use it as a tool for political education. How do we understand at a very real level what is happening in real time, right? That becomes very important. And also listening to this conversation, just all of the continuities of the things that, most of us are engaged in, particularly fighting in our local conditions here in the United States, whether we're in, Washington, D.C. or Chicago or in the South. I do a lot of work with working class folk in the South with an organization called the Southern Workers Assembly and other things. So, we working class perspectives are the workers we center in a lot of the work to make sure that we're addressing the class and racial divisions and gender divisions that are there. So again, I want to thank you both for taking the time to spend with me today. I look forward for a little bit more conversation. Any closing thoughts? I thank you, Katinka, for that thank you, Okanka, for that. Our comrade had to jump off really quick because he's out. Well, power was out, right? He needed to have a cell phone. Which is the struggle that we're talking about, right? You have a continent that it produces the wealth for the global north, right? But the lights go out, the cell phones you go out, it's just one of those things. I don't mean to laugh about it because it's not funny, but it's also like just to understand that if we were to collectively stretch,
it's a comical tragedy.
Right, exactly. So, but anyway, any closing thoughts, by all means, please, any closing thoughts that any of you may have, or that you would like to share.
Thank you. For us is that the Revolutionary Socialist League remains to continue always working amongst the masses, and for us is to continue with the offense against capitalism, and which is of course spearheaded by the constant political education. And for us, this work is actually derived through the philosophy of the working class, and we continue constantly to sharpen on these ideas because we believe it's only through socialism that we can be able to achieve a life of dignity. It's only through socialism we can be able to achieve a life of total respect. It's only through socialism that we can be able to wage war against all this repression that we're experiencing.
Just to finish up with everything, because we're speaking on Patrice Lumumba, there's this quote that I really like to speak. It says that without dignity, there's no liberty. Without justice, there is no dignity. And without independence, there are no free men. And that's from Patrice Lumumba, really, which really inspires me a lot. Thank you.
No, thank you both.
I'm a sweet little lovemaker.
That's it for Africa World Now Project for this week. I would like to thank you for joining us today and look forward to spending time with you next week. Follow us on Instagram at Africa World Now Project. Access to our other media platforms can be reached through the bios of our social media. I'm your host and producer, James Pope. Programs are archived and available on all podcast platforms. Search Africa World Now Project. Until next week, be safe, be peaceful, and above all, be intelligent.